Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones Season 6 Rewatch Review. In this video, I give my impressions of Season 6 of Game of Thrones after having recently rewatched it in anticipation of Season 7. So, I've already covered Season 6 in a series of videos, so this video will be more for my feelings of Season 6 after my recent rewatch and how it relates to the upcoming Season 7. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to the end of Season 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So watching Season 6 right after Season 5, I did notice an increase in quality. For these past rewatch reviews I've been talking a lot about backloaded seasons and how I feel most seasons of Game of Thrones are backloaded, particularly 5 and 6. And although I stand by this, in this recent rewatch of Season 6, I don't think it's actually that backloaded, or at least not as much as Season 5. It is in the sense that the last two episodes of the season were simply amazing and became my two favorite episodes of the entire show, and they were the two great episodes of the season. However, the season is far more consistently good than Season 5 was, and the first 8 episodes each contain their own ups and downs and are interesting and boring to varying degrees, which makes it quite different than seasons like, say, Season 4, where you can very clearly point to like episodes 1, 2, 8, 9, and 10 and say these are the great episodes, and then point to episodes 3, 4, and 5 and be like, well, these episodes weren't so good. But with Season 6, it wasn't as clear-cut, as there are great and not so great scenes sprinkled in throughout the first 8 episodes. But of course, the last 2 episodes were just amazing works of art. So, like last time, there's one episode in particular that I want to talk about, and that is episode 8, No One, which I feel similarly to episode 6 of season 5, Unbound, Unbent, Unbroken, which I mentioned was the lowest rated episode on IMDb, and yet I feel was one of the better episodes of the entire show. Similarly, No One is the second lowest rated episode on IMDb, and similarly I feel is one of the better episodes of the entire show. So let's get right into the heart of the matter. People hated the Arya scenes of this episode, and honestly that surprised the hell out of me because I loved them. Apparently a lot of people didn't recognize the stabbing scene in episode 7 as horrible writing, that it was, and so came up with a lot of these crazy theories that tried to explain it away, but none of those theories, which in my humble opinion were pretty out there and flimsy to begin with, came to pass, and things were in fact as they appeared. I guess they were outraged and held that against the episode, but I assert and will always assert the problem with the Arya storyline wasn't with this episode, it was with the previous episode, which is why I feel episode 7 was the weakest episode of the season. In this episode, I actually really liked the Arya stuff, and I was genuinely shocked at the negative reaction it got, as I found the chase scene one of the best shot sequences in the entire season, which had such a great and satisfying conclusion with Arya setting a trap for the waif, and then her confrontation with Jaqen, where it was apparent to me that Jaqen had been hoping all along that Arya would decide to relive her life, and was acting here, Jaqen was acting here more like a profound father. I absolutely loved these scenes, and after I watched episode 7, I sort of made my peace that episode fucked up and Arya shouldn't have been stabbed like that. So by the time I got to this episode, I had already moved past that, where apparently a lot of people hadn't. But more than that, this episode had many other great scenes, such as the infamous I Choose Violence scene with Cersei, which was another one of my favorite moments of the entire season, where Lancel and the arrogant sparrows think they can just stroll in and take Cersei on the pose, but she stands up to them and has the mountain rip that dude's head off. That was just awesome. And I also quite like the stuff with the Hound as it showed him in his true form, as when he stabbed that guy and he was like, oh, is that really going to be your last words? You can do better than that. And he was just like, cunt! That was just great. The only real low point of the episode for me was the river run scenes, which I found disappointing. But rewatching this episode again, knowing where they're going with it, I actually appreciated a lot more, as we had some really good interactions with Edmure and Jaime. So overall, I think this is one of the better episodes of the season, and I firmly stand by that regardless of what anyone else says. So overall, I did find that Season 6 contained a lot less filler and dull, slow-paced scenes than Season 5. In fact, I'd say the only filler this season were the High Sparrow scenes. Pretty much any scene with him in it, whether he be talking to Marjorie or Tommen, was either much slower and longer than it needed to be, or just plain unnecessary altogether. I suppose, after Season 5, they had hired this, great actor, Jonathan Pryce, to play the High Sparrow, and they're like, wow, we had this good actor, we might as well use him. And then, of course, they knew this would be Marjorie, Tommen, and Loris's last season. It was like, oh, well, we might as well use them too, so they made up all these scenes that didn't really need to be there. But other than that, there wasn't really any filler this season, where Season 5 was just quite abundant with it, which is why I feel Season 6 was more consistently good. However, most of the first 8 episodes of Season 6 were good, but not altogether great, amazing. But we did get a few great scenes, such as the whole Hodor reveal, which came along with his death, which was just absolutely brilliant and tragic, and Davos and Ed defeating Alicent Dorne, as well as Jon's resurrection and his reunion with Sansa, and before that, Brienne's heroic rescue of Sansa, and finally getting into her service. Sam's reunion with his father was also quite interesting, as he was every bit the asshole that he thought he'd be, and the play in Bravos Arya Goes To was quite interesting, introspect of the show so far, particularly for Arya, and Daenerys' conquest with the Dothraki was quite fascinating as well as the return of the Hound, which was done wonderfully with a great performance by Ian McShane. But for the most part, most of the scenes in this part of the episode were good, but part of the season, were good but not great. And there were a few blunders as well. The worst, of course, being the Dorne debacle, which there's also the mishandling of the Kingsmoot, which saw Euron acting like a cliche mustache-twirling villain with his infamous "let's go murder them" line. And of course, Arya just casually strolling around Bravos in broad daylight when she knew the Faceless Men wanted to kill her, which led to her getting viciously stabbed, and which should have easily killed her. But despite these flaws, I still feel Season 6 was a vast improvement on Season 5, and with the final 2 episodes, it was just pure awesome gold, with the best battle episode that we ever had, Battle of the Bastards, and the thrilling finale, which kicks off with an absolutely amazing sequence with the piano music as Cersei blows up all of her enemies. So I would in fact say that Season 6 is the second best season behind Season 4, but that's just my opinion. There are a few other scenes, though, many have stated they felt were unnecessary or unneeded, but I actually disagree. Such as the scene where Tyrion, Grey Worm, and Missandei drink some wine and tell jokes. I love this scene, and furthermore, I felt it was absolutely vital to have this scene, as you needed to see Tyrion, Grey Worm, and Missandei bond as they were working together. It would have been dull had they not interacted at a personal level. Plus, it was vital for the character growth of Grey Worm and Missandei to actually learn how to relax and to have fun together, as their lives has always been so dreary and serious. Part of being free is learning to enjoy life. So not only was the sense of humor entertaining, I also found it vital for character growth. Another scene I heard many complain about was the scene in episode 6 where Daenerys meets up with Drogon again and gives a speech to the Dothraki on Dragonback. Many were saying this was just a repeat of the scene where Daenerys emerges from the fire with the Dothraki bowed to her, and that this scene offers nothing new and wasn't necessary, but I totally disagree. I think the scene was absolutely vital. In fact, I'd go as far to say that I felt Daenerys' Dothraki storyline overall was too rushed, and we needed to have more scenes that established that the Dothraki now worship her as a god. And this scene even solidified that relationship and made it clear how close they follow her as she names them all her blood riders. More than that, it was vital that she was riding Drogon when she made the speech, because the Dothraki are a race of horse riders, and so to have a dragon rider would be the ultimate sign of a warrior to them. So I think this scene makes it clear that the Dothraki are truly devoted to her. So now let me get into a few observations about Season 6 that may affect Season 7. Season 6 actually gives us a different perspective on Cersei, as in Season 5 she failed horribly, and it showed her as an incapable leader, whereas here, Cersei starts the season completely defeated and lacking power. Nobody will listen to her, she's shunned, she's not even allowed in the small council. Pycelle, who historically would just cower to her, even paid her no heed and spoke out against her. Her only ace in the hole was Qyburn and the Mountain, but other than that, she was pretty beaten and defeated. When she attempted to turn things around by forming an alliance with Lady Olenna, she was just tossed aside and dismissed. However, by the end of the season, she's the queen of Westeros as she destroys all of her enemies in one foul swoop. And that was just such a giant reversal of fortune, but in the process she ended up losing her last surviving son, and this will most likely have the effect of dulling her even more and making her less feeling and empathetic and simply not caring about anything. But the big question of what implications this has on Season 7 is, will Cersei be an effective leader? As although she failed badly in Season 5, here she manages to control her fate quite well. So it may in fact show that she has learned from her mistakes. As many has pointed out, Season 6 ends with Daenerys having a massive advantage over Cersei, as Daenerys has dragons, Unsullied, Dothraki, Ironborn, Dornish, the Tyrells, and Varys. So it looks like Cersei is doomed. However, I wouldn't count her out so easily, as Season 6 is a prime example of what Cersei can do when her back is against the wall. The question is, will she fall back to the wildfire again, or will she have some different tricks up her sleeve for Season 7? I'm hoping for some different tricks, but we'll just have to see. So as for Jon Snow, in Season 6 he starts off in the Night's Watch. Well, of course he starts off dead, but then in the Night's Watch. But then he makes the transition to King of the North. But in Season 7 will be the first season he'll be completely outside of the Night's Watch and dealing in the world of politics. And to be honest, he doesn't really seem prepared for this. This is exemplified in the Battle of the Bastards, where he is outwitted by Ramsay, and had it not been for Sansa, he would have lost that battle. And he had this attitude like, oh, I face much worse than Ramsay, but facing off against the Wildlings and the White Walkers is actually much more straightforward than the political landscape of Westeros, which I'm not sure he's ready for. So much like Daenerys, he would be wise to rely on his advisors, particularly Davos, who does have a lot of experience in the politics of Westeros and moreover has a special gift to talk anyone into doing anything. So he does have that going for him. He would also be wise to listen to Sansa more, who has had a lot of experience in how backstabbing and conniving the politics of Westeros can be. But, on the other hand, thanks to Littlefinger's whispering in her ear, Sansa may also be a threat from within for Jon, something that he'll need to look out for, so we'll just have to see. As for Daenerys, I'd like to take this time to talk about the rushed pace of Season 6, as that was a common complaint about the season, and frankly, I feel a valid one. And personally, I think Daenerys' storyline was the one where the rushed feeling was the most apparent, as after spending several seasons of her just dilly-dallying about in the Marine, it felt like the season was just rushing to get to the end, as it rushed to her reunion with the Dothraki and subsequent conquering of them, as well as her finally resolving the situation in Marine. It was so rushed, I felt this left a lot of the audience confused as to what the show was actually trying to say with these storylines, which I don't blame them because it wasn't altogether clear, as the show was trying to say that Daenerys is now worshipped by the Dothraki as some sort of deity, therefore they'd be willing to follow her commands in all things, including changing the way that they do things. And with Marine, the show was trying to say that this situation is done, that Tyrion got the city under control and got it prospering, which is why the Masters decided to attack, but Daenerys and her dragons attack took care of the Masters for good, so slavery is done in the area, the Masters don't have any power anymore, and the Sons of the Harpy are no more. So in short, the show is done with Marine, and we won't be seeing it again. And these are major story beats that it does feel like Season 6 kind of yada-yada'd through and didn't spend as much time as they needed to, which does have me a bit concerned about the pace of Season 7. As the showrunners have stated that Season 7 will have the fastest pace yet, as there are only 7 episodes, and they seem like they're all going to be jam-packed. And I'm all for faster pace. My complaint about most of the seasons, but Season 3 and 5 in particular, is that they were too slow and contained too much filler. But it is possible to then switch to the other extreme and move too fast, where you lose connection to the great personal and character stories that have always been at the heart of the show. And I feel Daenerys' Season 6 storyline is an example of that. However, it mostly dealt with the political situation in Essos, which isn't really important to the big picture of the show, so perhaps more care will be given with dealing with the affairs of Westeros, which is a more central theme to the main story, but we'll see. And moving on to Tyrion, watching Season 6 again without the expectations I had of what I wanted his storyline to be in Season 6, I get more of what they were going for with him in Season 6, and I do appreciate it more. As I alluded to earlier, I do think they kind of rushed it a bit, and perhaps too much of his storyline was tell rather than show, as we were told more than we were shown what Tyrion had done with Marine, as apparently he managed to take a city that was split in half and on the verge of civil war and calm the situation by reinvigorating commerce and overall increasing contentment and prosperity. I do think Season 6 could have done a better job at conveying this, but on a rewatch I did get more of this and what they were going for. However, we did get some great scenes with Tyrion and Varys in their prime doing their thing. I particularly love the scene we got with Varys manipulating this prostitute that we saw had worked for the Sons of the Harpy in order to gain information about who was controlling the Sons of the Harpy. That was a great scene. However, in retrospect, who was behind the Harpy was the most obvious thing in the world, as any idiot could have figured out that it was the masters of these other cities. But I suppose it was good of Varys to get concrete information. But one scene in particular I found very interesting on a rewatch was Tyrion and Varys meeting with the Red Priestess Kinvara. Now, many are wondering if we'll see her again. In fact, many were surprised that we didn't see her again in Season 6, as this scene did feel kind of like an introduction to a new character. However, looking back on it now, I think it's more likely that we will never see her again, and this was just a one-off character, and the main purpose of the scene was to show that this is how Tyrion would get the people to trust Daenerys again and support her rule, and we will see follow-up scenes where that actually worked. But I really love this scene in particular, as Varys is the doubting Thomas, as it's been established that he has a hatred for magic and those who practice it. And it was so creepy that Kinvara not only knew exactly why Varys hated magic and what happened to him, she claimed to know more about what than he did. She claimed to know why the sorcerer did what he did to Varys, and she also claimed to know what the voice said to the sorcerer. Furthermore, she referred to him as a second-rate sorcerer, implying that her magic was even more powerful. This, I think, is what intrigued audience members so much and wanting to see her more and see her again. But I don't think this was necessarily setting up another appearance by her, and was more of setting up the Red Priestess in general. And I think her storyline will be taken over by Melisandre, the Red Priestess that we already know. Because if there's one thing the show likes to do, is to condense characters, especially now that we're winding down to the end. So I think Melisandre will carry on this eerie knowledge of power. As we see in the trailer, she will be at Dragonstone with Daenerys, so I dare say we'll get at least one encounter between her and Varys. As for Arya, I think I talked about her Season 6 storyline enough. In fact, I did an entire video about this, so if you want to hear me talk about this more, you can check that out. But one thing I do want to mention is how widely I think her line to Jaqen, I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell and I'm going home, was misinterpreted, as many believe it was meant to imply she's going back to Winterfell to be a Stark, which isn't how I read that line, as I saw it more of she's returning home to Westeros to continue Arya Stark's kill list. And this interpretation is backed up by the fact that the very first thing she did when she returned to Westeros was to kill someone on her kill list. However, that being said, it does look like she will be returning to Westeros in Season 7, and we will get a Stark reunion, which I'm really excited to see, but I don't think Arya will see it as her final destination, and I don't think her intentions will be to just sit in a cushy castle and be a lady of Winterfell. It seems far more likely to me that she'll just see it more as a pit stop, and her kill list will still very much be on her mind. I mean, in Season 1 she made it clear that she did not want to be a lady. In fact, I think that maybe an internal struggle she might have this season that has, maybe she'll even be considering staying in Winterfell, but I think ultimately her desire for revenge will win out, and the season will end with her leaving Westeros to fulfill that need, because I do believe her entire storyline on the show thus far has been building towards her becoming this dark, badass assassin, and although she may visit Winterfell, there will be no real going home for her, but that's just my guess. So now let me touch on the often overlooked character of Samwell Tarly. Now, Sam didn't appear much in Season 6, only 3 episodes, 2 of which he only appeared in one brief scene. However, this was the first time we see Sam outside of the Night's Watch and the sole focus of his own storyline. We also get his backstory with his father fleshed out a bit more. So the question is, how prominent will Sam be featured in Season 7? Will his appearances be just as sparse? The fact that he wasn't in the trailers at all leads me to believe that he won't factor too heavily. However, I suspect we will see him meet up with other characters this season, which may help him appear more, as in Season 6 he and Gilly were rather isolated. But it does appear we will be seeing more of his dad, Randall Tarly, whom I suspect his scenes in Season 6 were there to introduce him to us, as I think we'll see him without Sam in other characters' storylines. In fact, many viewed the scene where Sam stole the family sword, Heartsbane, as an open thread that would be need to resolve of Randall coming after the sword, but I actually don't think that thread will ever be resolved, and I don't think it needs to be. I feel the sword may somehow become important in the fight against the White Walkers, as we know that they are vulnerable to Valyrian steel. So overall, I really liked Season 6. I thought it was one of the better seasons of the show, but not without its flaws, and Season 7 can do a lot to improve upon it. On the one hand, by having a faster pace and being more succinct, but on the other hand, by not rushing too much like some of these storylines did. And also, Season 7 should not make the same mistake with Euron and the Iron Island storyline that Season 6 did with Dorne by trying to sweep it under the carpet, but instead actually trying to fix their mistakes by having Euron and making him an interesting character. And I'm actually really confident that they will do this. And plus, Season 7 has the potential to be just as focused as the first two seasons, now that a lot of the superlative storylines are being whittled down. You don't have to deal with Bravos or Marine anymore, so we can start focusing on what's important and who's important. And like Season 6, I expect Season 7 to continue culling characters and killing off many of the supporting cast to focus more on the main cast for the final seasons. I only hope that Season 7 has less blunders than Season 6 did, as its killing of Prince Doran, Arya Hota, Osha, Rickon, Roose Bolton, and the Three-Eyed Raven, and most of all, Summer, was handled very poorly, and to some degree or another, and some of it actually felt quite contrived. So hopefully this is something that they can correct in Season 7 as well. We'll just have to wait and see. So that's it for my rewatch review of Season 6 of Game of Thrones. Be sure to join me for my extensive coverage of Season 7, which will include an episode review shortly after the episode airs, an hour or 2 hour long discussion video with my brother Abkin Tomko and various special guests from other YouTubers that we will be doing several days after the episode airs, and a further analysis video where I get into spoilers, theories, and predictions for each episode that I will do later in the week. Also, be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, Dark Matter, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.